And welcome into Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network. Also being simulcast on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. They're Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Fleming Island, and St. John's. Holy cow. Look who is in the building. Ladies and gentlemen, Denny Thompson has remembered where the 1010XL studios are. I think this is the first podcast you and I have done 5 months. I think March was the last one. It was before the NFL draft.
We did one in March?
Yeah, I think we did one in March.
Oh.
And then at that point you said, I'm done. I'll see you at football season.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah. I could have handled that better.
Probably.
I definitely could have handled that better. But what's most impressive is you still have the same sheet of paper.
This is about a 4 or 5 year old sheet of paper. There's no question about it. All right. So you have not been on this podcast or really on the radio station in a while. Let's just kind of catch people up. You have been traveling a lot to Indianapolis and to South Florida. I mean, take us through the life of Denny Thompson since Anthony Richardson was drafted in the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, to keep it Anthony-centric, I haven't done as much with him after the draft as what people think because they get there and there's just not time, right? So a couple weeks ago, we went to Miami, got some work in down there just before training camp. And then, outside of that, man, we've been going. We've been going and we've just been training, not just Anthony, but a lot of guys. We got, a lot of high school, college, NFL guys that we've been working with. It's been fun. You just kind of wake up and you're like, holy cow, this is my life. Do I even like this?
Well, and to catch people up on that, 6 points.
Yeah.
You started 6 points how many years ago now?
Officially, 6 points was a thing like in 2016, but we started this whole thing 2011, 2012.
All right, so 10 years, or even if you want to go 7 years, man, to where it is now, you
cool.
guys are
it's cool.
are up there on the quarterback training tiers in the entire country.
Yeah, and I've been extremely fortunate too. You look at the core guys that we kind of got to bring up through high school and college, and there's a bunch of dudes that are probably going to be first-round picks that we've known since they were, 14 years old, 12 years old in some cases. And so it's cool, man. It's like it's the biggest blessing of my life that I've ever had. So it's been a really cool experience. And just seeing Anthony, the first time I worked with Anthony was in Gainesville at a park there. And he was in 10th grade, going into 10th grade, I believe.
Yeah, you told me about Anthony Richardson, I believe, right before his junior year. So that's about right.
Yeah, and so just to see a kid who has a family who's working to just, keep everything going and together and to just kind of be able to go through all the successes and failures and emotional times with him. And it was just a cool moment when, you walk into the combine together and you look around and you're just like, it's a little bit different scene than this park that we met at in Gainesville, 5 years ago. And so just to see the success and the maturity, Anthony don't need me anymore. That's the reality of it. Like, Anthony is a grown man. He knows what he's doing. So at this point, it's like, hey, dude, we're here. You know what I mean? Like, we're here, but we want to support you in anything you do. And we're a resource at this point. For the most part, our job is not done, but what we were hired to do through the draft process is done. So now you move on.
How is he doing up in Indianapolis?
He's great, man. He's great. He's, Anthony just turned 21. When he was drafted, he was 20 years old. So he just turned 21. And so you can see that maturity by fire thing going on, even through the draft process. And I think Anthony is in a lot of ways the same kid that he was when I was training him at 15, 14 years old, whatever that was. But then the last year, you've seen just a huge growth of maturity, and I'm excited about his future. And it's a neat dynamic because Gardner Minshew is there, and Gardner's my guy. Like, Gardner, of all the clients that I have, Gardner and I are probably like the closest. We talk the most. And so just to have the two of them together is really, really cool.
That's probably been easy for Anthony because Anthony and Gardner were with you and throwing together, right? Which became a story for some reason before the draft. I do remember that. But even so, you have an Anthony to have a guy on there on that team that's a buddy of his already had to be pretty cool.
Yeah, and Sam Ellinger's there as well, and he's worked with Will Hewlett for years, who I work closely with, and Tom at Torque. And so just that whole quarterback room, the dynamic, and the Colts have a bunch of good dudes as coaches and scouts and personnel guys. It's been as easy as it could be. And so it's set up really well for everybody. Gardner looks fantastic too. And that's way above my pay grade on who's ever going to start. I have no idea.
Oh, that was the next question, because I'm sure we got a lot of Jaguar fans watching.
No, I have no clue. And I get that question all the time. But at this point, like, my job is to stay away, right? Like, once they get there, those coaches are really good at every NFL team. And so my job at this point is to just kind of stay away and be a resource and become a fan just like everybody else.
All right, so that's the Anthony Richardson side of things. Obviously a former Florida Gator. We certainly wish him the best his rookie year in the National Football League. There is a lot of Florida Gator news to get into as fall camp has begun. You've been around the college game for a long time. First week of fall camp. They're on the field, I believe 3 practices in. Billy Napier and that coaching staff, what are they trying to establish in week number 1? We're still 4 weeks out from a game being played, but certainly camp is underway.
Yeah, I don't think they're thinking about week 1 yet. You talking about week 1 Utah or week 1 at camp?
Week 1 at camp.
Oh, my
What's
bad.
going
on
right now?
That. Yeah. I think right now they're just trying to establish what this team's identity is going to be, right? And you can go into a camp and you can say, hey, I know what it's going to be, and then you get into camp and you realize that 3 months is a long time for that age guy, right? So a lot can change from spring to fall camp. If your strength coach is doing his job, then people are more explosive, people are bigger, people are stronger. And so maybe some guys that you thought were borderline second level guys have matured and jumped, and now they're a surprise, and vice versa. Maybe some guys didn't work quite as hard. And I don't know, I haven't been down there, but I think that's probably consistent and true for across the country for everybody. I think that first week is, let's see who wants to work. Let's see who's been in the playbook. Let's see who's been diligent in the offseason. Let's start to establish a depth chart, give everybody a lot of reps. And then when you get to week 2, 3, closer to the season, okay, let's start pulling back on some of those reps. Some guys that we know need a little bit more developmental time. Or maybe there's some guys that, hey, maybe they came in a little overweight, or maybe they came in a little underweight, and we got to start working on that type of stuff, which is really tough work. So I think all of those unseens in week 1, all those surprises, you just want to be ready and flexible for those things. And if there's anything that Billy Napier is, it's organized. He is extremely organized. He knows what he's doing, right? And he has an overall plan. So I think for him, in his mind, he's probably got 5 or 6 things he's wanting to see out of these first 10 practices before he decides what those next 10 are going to look like.
You are the quarterback guy. Some even call you a quarterback whisperer.
Yeah.
So
I don't really like those people.
I get you. With that being said, what do you know about Graham Mertz? What is your opinion on Graham Mertz? As it would appear, he is going to be the starting quarterback for Florida August 31st against Utah. This
is where I'm not a whole lot of help to Gator Bytes. Because we have been in a cocoon, and if you're not training with us, I haven't paid attention, not in a bad way, right? But just
you've been so focused.
In.
Yeah.
But if I listen to what I've been told about the staff, they're very excited about this quarterback room, and I think it's legitimate. Like I've talked to them several times about anything, and then the quarterback room comes up, and I've met Graham. I've met Jack. I've met Max. That room, I don't train any of them, but I know them. And they're excited about them. I haven't seen enough to know, but I do know that the identity of this Florida football team is not going to be the quarterback.
Right.
If it is the quarterback, it's either a great surprise or it's an issue. It's one of the two.
And to that point, Florida fans, the fun and gun, right, with Spurrier, the spread with Urban. This year, and tell me if I'm wrong, your opinion, 1st and 10, you're on Montrell Johnson for 4 yards. 2nd and 6, you're on Montrell Johnson for 3 yards. 3rd and 3, you complete a 6-yard hitch route. 1st down, move the chains. I mean, that's going to be kind of what this Gator team is.
Yeah, and I don't mean this in the truest sense, but if you think back to Saban's early years, right, before he started throwing the ball 40 or 50 times, this is what he did. This is exactly what he did. Yeah, A.J. McCarron, those guys, they were I'm going to use the term game managers, but not in a negative way, in a very positive way. The quarterback knew what their strengths were, knew what their weaknesses were, but bigger than that, they knew what the team strengths were, and they knew the situations they could not get into, 3rd and long, stupid penalties, things like that. So if this team can continue to do that, I think they can surprise some people because they are big, and the running backs are special. When we did Anthony's Pro Day, I got a chance to see a lot of these guys come out and catch for us because we were there that whole week. And when I tell you that ETN is like special, I mean that. I mean, Trevor is a talented athlete. And so is Montrell. It's just 2 completely different skill sets. So I think as far as 1-2 punches go, they got it. And they got other people in that room. If the offensive line can stay healthy and hold up, then I'm sure they have a game plan that involves a bunch of RPO stuff, things that put a ton of stress on a defense that's trying to stop the run. So as long as they can keep ahead of the chains, they should be fine, I would think. Now, what is fine? That's the other thing is, as Florida fans, is fine 8 wins? Or if they get 8 wins, are you more mad about the 4 losses, 5 losses, whatever it comes out to be? That would be my definition of fine. Like, I think if they can get to that 8 number, you're heading in the right direction. Year 3 should be pretty good, and you go from there.
Today's Gator Bytes podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for any orthopedic injury or concern. You can log on to their website by going to se-ortho.com, and you can listen for Southeast Orthopedic Specialist, the good doctor, Kevin Murphy, on Thursday mornings in the 7 o'clock hour with Jeff and Dan right here on 1010XL for his weekly analysis of injuries in the world of sports. We talk about the word fine, right? The schedule, the preseason prognostication. There is no question that there are a lack of expectations for the Gators this year. Athlon, Lindy's. I had Phil Steele on my radio show. He has them 5th in the SEC East. 5th. And his logic was, and I don't necessarily disagree with him, South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, you throw them all into a hat, but Florida's got to go to Columbia, and they got to go to Lexington. If those games were in Gainesville, it might be different, but those are road games for the Gators. So you mentioned 8. I've said repeatedly, and this is where I'm at. You tell me 7-5 right now with that schedule, Denny, I'd probably take that.
Yeah.
And I do wonder how Gator fans will, if they will be receptive to that.
Without knowing the details of everybody's roster, just kind of taking what you saw last year and assuming that losing Will Levis hurts Kentucky. And I don't mean this against Will, but I'm not sure it does because Leary's pretty freaking good.
You go into the portal and they get Devin Leary.
Right. Like that, the portal changes a lot of things for this, but you start to look at things like, okay, South Carolina is going to go. Are you getting the Spencer Rattler of early in the season or the Spencer Rattler late in the season? And we'll find that out. Kentucky, I mean, I think Florida's always going to be in that game in some way, right? Even when they're significantly better than Kentucky, that's a close game. When maybe they're not as good, it's still a close game. So, like, that becomes a 2 critical possessions, 3rd, 4th quarter. Like, what do you do? Do you get points or do you have to punt? And then Tennessee, I think, like, I was thinking about Tennessee the other day because I was looking at our schedule. And I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, what games I'm going to, and I want to go see Carson at Georgia. And I looked at that Tennessee game late in the season. And I'm like, okay, is that going to be the same as what Georgia-Tennessee was last year? How good was Hendon Hooker?
Yeah.
How good was that receiving core, and how much did that offense surprise the SEC?
Well, people seem to love Joe Milton. I mean, I remember Joe Milton in Orlando. I saw him at an Under Armour camp, and you're the guy to ask. I mean, every once in a while you hear an Anthony Richardson comparison about Joe Milton, the quarterback at Tennessee.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, his arm is as special as any arm that I've ever seen in my life. And I don't personally know Joe. But you don't know. Like, you don't know. You don't know a guy coming into the offense the first year. An offense, by the way, that everybody's had more time to prepare for. And I can assure you, by the way, I've heard this from so many people. There's so many teams saying, hey, we're doing Tennessee stuff now. Well, Tennessee stuff is like Brow stuff, right? You know what I mean? Like, this is not new. But when a team starts to do Tennessee stuff, you know what they also do? They see it every day. And defensively, you start to go, okay, these wide splits, this is how we're going to play this, and this is what we're going to do. Tennessee, this is a critical year for them. Like, are you back to what the Tennessee we had, or did you just have a special year last year?
Did you catch lightning in a bottle?
Right, and I don't know what that is, but until you find that out, I don't think that you, as a Florida fan, just automatically go L.
Well, the way I'm rationalizing it, all right, you look at the 12 Florida games. They got 2 cupcakes, was like McNeese State and somebody else, and then they got Vanderbilt. And I understand Vanderbilt beat Florida last year, but come on. It's in Gainesville. You got to beat Vanderbilt. So I'm going to give them those.
Are you saying Vanderbilt's a cupcake, or are you saying they've got 2 other cupcakes?
They got 2 cupcakes and
then
Vanderbilt.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
And I would think they're going to beat Vanderbilt. So I'm going to give them those 3. Your 2 toss-ups to me, Florida does not play well at Missouri. For whatever reason, they just don't play well up there. So to me, that's a toss-up. And then Arkansas in Gainesville. If that game was in Fayetteville, I would pick the Razorbacks. In Gainesville, Florida has a good chance to me to beat Arkansas. So that gets you to 5. They're underdogs in their other 7 games, right? I mean, Utah, LSU, Florida State, Georgia. Who am I missing? South Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee. I think they're probably a dog in all 7 of those games.
I think you're probably right, but I think the dynamic of this team, and I'm not being a homer for them at all, but I think the dynamic of this team of run heavy, now it comes down to how good is your defense. And if your defense is good and you can run the ball, you're in most games in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And now it's just kind of like we saw it locally with the Jags last year. It's like there's a lot of games they weren't even in the fourth quarter. They came back, but they kept it close enough to strike, right? And a big play here, a big play there.
So that's the thing, though. Florida can't fall behind by 14.
They can't. But if it's 14 and not 28 because you ran the clock down and you get to the fourth quarter against, I don't know, Georgia, down 14, then, okay, I'm staying. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying they're going to win those games. I'm just saying there's some that they can catch some breaks. And when I look at the games you said, or I look at Utah, and they have a chance in these games if they control the line of scrimmage and play good defense. Football's still football. Like, if you punch the other guy in the mouth, they've got to adjust. And so if Napier and crew can get a physical nature to this football team and say, hey, we are who we are, and everybody doubts you, and they use that as motivation to, okay, I know everybody thinks Florida's throwing the ball everywhere, but we're not. We're going to run it right down your throat. You're going to know what we're doing, and we're going to establish that mentality. Then I think 7-8 wins is a possibility. And you look at what Mike Norvell did at Florida State, and I think this proves a critical point with the transfer portal. I'm done judging coaches until they get their team. Mm-hmm. I'm done with it. I don't care who it is.
You got to give them 3 years minimum.
You have to give them those 3 years because in 3 years they can completely flip a roster and they can change a culture. They can't do it in 1 year, 2 year. They can't do it because you got a bunch of guys who committed to another guy. So they're always going to have that doubt about this guy. Now, this guy is in living rooms, bringing guys in. They're bought into what he's doing. He's able to establish a culture, a dynamic to that, or an identity even to that football program. So in my mind, this is a free roll for Napier and his whole staff. Like I said last year, and I'll say it again, it's critical at this point that you keep staffs together, that you don't make harsh, rash decisions, because then you find out what you truly are as a coach and as a staff and as a football program when people know the system and they hear the same terminology and now they're playing with speed instead of thinking, right? So I think that this year is not a lost year. Could they only win 4? Sure. Am I going to judge Napier? Not unless he just does some stupid game management stuff. In my mind, like Billy Napier is the right guy right now.
I want to get more into Napier in a moment as we begin to wrap up. Quickly, 1 offense, 1 defense. On offense, I agree with you. Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne, maybe even Trayon Webb from right here in Jacksonville. They got some dudes at running back. The question is, they lost a lot on the line, man. Garage is gone. Osiris Torrance is gone. They lost guys in the portal. Now, they got guys in the portal, but how quickly can an offensive line gel? Because that offense has to rely on that running game, which means that offensive line's got to figure it out and figure it out pretty quick.
Yeah, the one thing that as a Florida fan I think would give me a little bit of peace is I talk to a lot of coaches at every level, high school, college, pro. Everybody has the same issue. There's just not big guys playing football anymore like there used to be, right? So you don't have the depth at line. If you're not Alabama, if you're not Georgia, and I don't even know the details of their rosters, I'm just assuming they're loaded at line.
I'm going to assume they're pretty good.
Right, yeah. But outside of that, like, I think everybody has those same issues. And so I do think it comes down to health and how well are they coached? And then are you putting them in the right situation to succeed? Do you know your team well enough to say, all right, I'm cool with only scoring 14 in the first 3 quarters or only scoring 17 in the first 3 quarters as long as that other team only has the ball for 14, 15 minutes.
Quickly to defense, and then I want to get back to Billy. Do you know Austin Armstrong?
I don't.
Okay. 29-year-old. He might be 30 by now. I'm not sure if he had a birthday. But the bottom line is here's a 30-year-old guy that's thrust into being a D coordinator. But I've been told by numerous people, enough people now that I'm taking notice of, that he is going to be a stud.
Yeah.
He's a stud on the recruiting trail. If you want to know why they're getting a lot of these defensive guys, it's because Austin Armstrong. And I don't know if that's an age thing, if he relates more to the players, that might have something to do with it. I'm very curious to see how he does on the field, because Austin Armstrong, to me, might be everything that we hoped Patrick Toney was.
I don't know him, but I'm going to tell you a quick story about a different guy that, from what I've heard about him, he reminds me of. I was at the University of Georgia a few years ago, and a guy came walking in, and this was back when James Coley was the offensive coordinator, so this has been a while back. And a guy comes walking into the meeting room, full of energy, young guy, and I'm just like, whoa, who was that? Like, just that presence about him, right? And I remember both Kirby Smart and James Coley saying, that's a superstar. That's a future superstar. It's Dan Lanning.
Wow.
Right? And that's who this guy everything that I'm being told about this, that's who this guy reminds me of. That's now the Oregon head coach, right? And a major reason why Georgia was able to get over the hump and win national championships. A major reason. From everything I'm hearing, like, that's what they've got down in Gainesville with this guy. And I think you just got to know that there's going to be mistakes made, right? There's development as a coach as well. But a lot of those mistakes can be covered up if you've got the athletes, right? And they are recruiting at what are they, third?
Third, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when's the last time Florida was third in recruiting, right? I mean, that alone right there tells me, all right, they got something going on in Gainesville if you're third coming off the season that they had last year.
And I want to get to that. And I want to get to this season and what that may mean for that class as we wrap up. Gator Bytes here. It's brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. They're Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Fleming Island, and St. John's. Quickly to Billy Napier. I'll tell you what's funny. Gator fans are the most impatient college fans on planet Earth. I think you and I can both agree on that. They have no patience. And you guys know it, watching and listening. You guys have no patience when it comes to nonsense or losing or anything you want to call it. Having said that,
let's just call them demanding.
They're very demanding.
That seems like a nicer way.
Yeah, very demanding. Having said that, I get the feeling that Billy Napier in their eyes is much, much more Will Muschamp than he is McElwain or Mullen. I think they like Napier. And because I think they like Napier, they're willing to be more patient, much like they were with Will Muschamp.
I hope so. I don't have my finger on the pulse of Gator fans because I haven't done radio in forever, right? So I don't know that, but I hope you're right because I do think that this guy is very much like the guys that are having a lot of success, right? If you look at guys like Kirby, you look at guys like Saban, you look at guys like, you got to put Norvell in there now, you look at guys like Ryan Day, you look at those guys, they all have common attributes, right? They all have things that they all do the same, and Napier is that. Napier's first thing was, I got to have a huge staff because we got to recruit at a high level, and we've got to touch every touch point that we can with high school coaches, and they bring high school coaches in and do board sessions with them during the summer, things like that. They're putting in the time to develop relationships because that staff loves the game of football, number one, and they actually love the recruiting aspect of it. Katie's a rock star. We all know that. Like, he has done what he needs to do on the recruiting side. He's so organized and he's so stuck in his beliefs in a good way that the football side I don't worry about. Like, he is going to be prepared on that. So I think first year, maybe the worst thing that happened to him last year was winning that Utah game the way that they did because it just went through the roof. But I think we're going to see more of those type games this year. I really do. I think a year in, He knows where he's going game day. I know that sounds so silly, but there's a comfort level, right? He knows everybody at the university now. He knows who he needs to know. You get more comfortable, you get more confident. And I think there's probably a different level of confidence in that program right now, even though they're being talked about as possibly finishing last in the East, which I don't think has ever been talked about at this point in the season.
No.
I in a weird way, I think it's probably given them a little bit of confidence to go out and prove some people wrong.
Now, let me ask you this as we wrap up. All right, number 3 recruiting class in America, depending on what website you look at, they're in the top 5 of all of them. Right. 24/7 Rivals on 3. If it is a bad year, you follow recruiting and you're part of recruiting and you've done it for years. I mean, if it is 5-7 or 6-6 or heaven forbid even worse, I don't think it'll be worse, but for argument's sake, I mean, how hard is it going to be to keep a top 5 class intact with performance like that on the field?
Top 5, yeah, that'd be tough. I think.
Or does the NIL dynamic maybe wins losses don't mean as much?
No,
now?
I don't think so because everybody's got money, right? I mean, we don't have a salary cap in college football, and the numbers that people are hearing are way wrong. These kids aren't getting that much money. The big boys are all kind of playing the same game at this point. So I think it's back to, okay, yes, there's money, but there's also recruiting and there's system and there's fit and there's development. And all these guys are going there to get to Sundays. Mm-hmm. So if you can prove that this past year is just us building towards something bigger and you are part of something bigger and we are going to develop you in this way and this way and this way, and here's our facilities to do so, right? I don't think it affects it that much. I think largely that's what they're recruiting on right now is, yeah, you can go to Alabama, you can go to Georgia, and you can wait 3-4 years to play. Or you can come here and our facilities and our processes match and you can get on the field a little bit sooner.
To that point, I talked to Fletcher Westfall, 4-star tackle from Virginia that they got about a month ago. And I said, what was it about Billy Napier? And he said, well, he loved him, players coach, all that. But he said, you can go to Georgia or Alabama and you can be a guy that's a part of a great program. You go to Florida, we need you to be the guy.
Yeah. Yep.
And 18-year-olds, when they hear that resonates with guys.
And to be fair, because I've heard the pitch many times from Kirby and Nick and all those guys on here, Coach Smart and Coach Saban. Their pitch is just as solid, right? Their pitch is, hey, you're going to get here, and we've done this a million times. You're going to sit behind this guy, and they're honest. If you're better, you're going to play, but if not, you're going to sit behind this guy. But we are going to develop you so that your name is called early in 3 years. So there's different ways to phrase the same thing, and so I think it just depends on the kid. I think it just depends on, do they want to play early? Do they feel like they can play early? Does the staff feel like they can play early? Where you start to get into a little bit of a situation if you're Florida, I think, and I haven't done a deep dive on this, but that guy who can play early at Florida and that guy that can play early at Alabama, do you win that one? Mm-hmm. That guy that can play early at Florida and that guy that can play early at Georgia or Ohio State or Michigan or any of those places, USC now, do you win that one? That's where winning football games comes in.
Right.
Now you're getting guys that, okay, they don't need to be as developed. They want to get on the field, and we're head-to-head with Alabama, and we're head-to-head with Georgia, and we can pluck those off.
You got to figure out how to get Harold Perkins. And for Perkins to not go to LSU.
Right, like things like that is absolutely the next step, and I think success on the football field will give you that, but he's setting up for success on the football field in the long term right now. I don't know about this year. I have no idea about this year, but I feel confident as someone who works in the football world that Billy Napier, year 4, year 5, year 6, year 7, is going to be one of the better coaches in college football.
Yeah, I agree. I like him, and I hope Gator fans give him time. And I think, at least what I'm hearing right now, Gator fans understand what 2023 is, but they also look ahead to what recruiting is going on in 2024, and it might be the calm before the storm.
Right.
Yep. He is Denny Thompson. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green. I can assure you, it will not be 5 months before he and I are in the same studio. We're inside of 4 weeks until Salt Lake City. We're going to be with you every week on Gator Bytes. Roughly 9 o'clock is when we're going to record it, at least on the Facebook page for the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page, 9 a.m. on Fridays. Of course, we'll post it also on 1010XL.com. Denny, enjoyed it, my friend. We'll do it again soon.
Yes, sir. It's fun.
Denny Thompson. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green. Thank you to watching and listening to Gator Bytes right here on 1010XL.com and the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page.